Well, good morning, everybody. There's a couple of things in this video that I just wanted to highlight, so in case you don't have much time, you can kind of scroll through and find those things. We're, of course, going to talk about this near-term pattern in the cold air that's coming through. We're going to follow that up with an update on the heavy rains that we're expecting throughout parts of the South next week, and that's going to spread into the Ohio Valley and through the Mid-South. But then I'm going to transition after this to the change in temperatures that we're going to get into. We're going to talk a bit about the long-range forecast for February and then get into the new data that was just released by the Climate Prediction Center. So that's a few minutes from now. So if you want to just zip ahead in the video to see that, go right to it. And at the very end, I've got some kind of new information I want to share with you about South America. So a lot to unpack this morning, but hopefully you'll enjoy this. I'm fascinated with radar data. I think it's just this incredible thing. I mean, just remember, this is a technology that was born out of World War II, where weather was a nuisance to our radar's ability to find, enemy aircraft. And here we are now, just decades later, using it to observe just the most minute details of the atmospheric flow. And I just want to show you some stuff. And now, all week I've been talking about the change in wind direction coming across the Great Lakes, such that we were going to get wind that was going to roll right down the spine here of Lake Michigan. Now, Lake Michigan's orientation compared to the other lakes is different. So if you can get a good north wind here, you get what are called lake effect vortices. Now look at them all spinning up right there. They're like a string of pearls. It's really amazing to see that. And these are going to be delivering locally very intense snow here. Now, speaking of snow, all of what you're seeing coming through here was some snow last night that rolled out of Iowa and Illinois, Indiana. It's pressing through the Ohio Valley this morning, which is when this radar animation ends. A couple of other neat things to note. We apparently have a blocked beam up here. I think what's going on is there is probably a cell phone tower very close, and it's producing an interfering signal. Remember, our cell phones communicate with microwaves as well, and that's what we're using here to sample precipitation. And the last thing I want to point out is there's a couple other fun little pieces to this. Watch right here. Keep a close eye right here. There is another. Watch it spin up right there. Another lake effect vortex, right, almost going over parts of Detroit. And then as the skies cleared out, you can see the wind farms, the radar beams getting ducted and hitting the wind farms at the Quad Cities, the Lincoln, and even the Des Moines radar. So I just wanted to point some of that out to you. Now, one thing's for sure is that the winds behind the snow that's moving through are quite strong today. And by mid-morning, they're going to be coming out of the north and northwest, and it's quite cold as well. I don't have snowfall totals yet. I record a bit too early to see those from this latest batch of snow that's come through here. But temperatures are dropping, and we're going to be seeing some very strong winds. Early morning low temperatures, you can see the position of the Arctic front right in through here. A lot of places still struggling to get above zero early this morning. But this is our final round of really, really cold air before this all starts to transition and move out. Now, we continue to see what I think is going to be the country's first billion-dollar weather disaster of 2024 with the ice storm that's going on in the Pacific Northwest. I showed you a video about it yesterday. This is still got one more kind of kick to it here. Winter storm advisories, and the winter storm warning right in this corridor. With all that cold air, this is all wind chill advisory. And we can see winter storm warnings for parts of the Appalachian Mountains, maybe the Blue Ridge down here, getting into parts of the Mid-Atlantic. And then the really cold air, of course, sinking all the way down to the Gulf Coast where we have freeze watches and freeze warnings. Now, in this forecast, the West is going to have relatively weak flow despite the Pacific jet extending. And there's just going to be multiple rounds of wet weather coming into the coastal parts of the western United States. So there is winter storm watches for the Sierra Nevada, and we've got a flood watch here for this part of California. But coming back to that ice threat, this is what the chances are of getting another 1/10 of an inch of ice through the next 72 hours. So we're not fully done with this yet. This has been just an absolutely terrible weather disaster in pockets of the Pacific Northwest. On the snowy side of it, I take you back down to the 2-inch. We had a little problem, I think, this morning with the GIS that is used here by this product. So let's go back to that 4-inch. We're just looking for where there's going to be some heavier snows in the near term. And we can see primarily the Sierra Nevada, some pockets here in the Rockies, and then up against the Appalachian Mountains here, I think is where we're going to see the biggest amounts. Now, throughout the West, there are 2 low-pressure cells we're going to watch over the weekend, but the Pacific jet continues to extend, pushing into the western United States, meaning for much of the next 7 or 8 days, we're just going to get flow, daily chances of getting moisture in. And that's because by the end of this weekend, our jet is just fully lined out. Now, here's the part of this forecast I want to stress. Last time this happened was in December. Remember, we talked about it building up to about Christmas. And after Christmas, what happened? This all began to retract. We had the big kind of Christmas Day blizzard event in the midsection of the country. And then after that, really, very cold Arctic air, and now in January, came out of parts of Alaska and Greenland and then dove into the United States. So when we see these jet extensions, our recent memory would say, okay, when this thing pulls back, are we going to get that again? I'm going to address that in a few moments, but that'll be one of the top priorities for me to try to understand in this upcoming forecast. So let's get into some of the details here with the high-res models. I'll just take this out there about 9 o'clock this morning. So lake effect continues. We can see the snow spreading throughout parts of the Ohio River Valley into parts of the Northeast, and we're going to be looking for some decent snows right in this area. We'll look at the snowfall totals in a moment. But behind this, a big area of high pressure comes in. Now, take a look at the Northwest. Throughout the day today, we continue to see that light freezing rain hitting these areas. And that's going to be ahead of this first big kind of frontal rain band that's going to come in off that low I just showed you lingering off the coast. So as that all comes into the west, okay, look, this high pressure cell moves right here, almost centered over like Omaha. And as this high pressure cell comes diving in, it's got some very cold air in it for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now what's going to happen is this high pressure cell is going to move to the southeast. And as it does so, the flow goes around them in a clockwise manner, and it's just going to open up the Gulf to moisture and heat transport. But where we're parked here is Saturday night at 11 p.m. And again, look at the west. There's just flow. There's just flow coming in, and that's why we continue to see the wetter conditions setting up there. All weekend long, we should expect some lake effect snow, and it'll only start to slow down once we get later in the day on Sunday. And that's when this whole pattern begins to make its transition back toward warmer conditions, getting rid of this Arctic air for a while. So just take a look. By Sunday afternoon, a mess across the western United States with the moisture that's coming in. Okay, let's compare some models here. The WPC right now, once we get into next week, and that high pressure moves over the southeast, the opening up of the Gulf, they say, is worth 5 to 7 inches of rain down here. That's a major flood threat happening. Remember, this is an area that for the past several months has been deep in drought. This contour line you see here is 1.5 inches. That's what that is. So you can see how far to the parts of the Delta, the Mid-South, getting up into the Ohio Valley, we're expecting this wetter weather. What is not in this pattern is there are no troughs coming over the Rocky Mountains. And as a result, we don't see any what we call least cyclogenesis. That would be the building of a storm system, a big low on the downwind side of the Rockies. And what's not good about that is this flow coming in from the west is kind of wasted and is not used to make anything come through this region. And this is just continuing to make an area that has been getting drier in this new year, drier and drier. And that's going to be a concern for a while for me to see how that's all going to pan out. And I'll kind of make a case for it in a few moments. But this is the WPC. This is the European model. We just add up the moisture coming in. Watch, this is Sunday into Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all of next week, we're just going to see one high pressure cell sit here, another one up farther to the north, and the squeeze happens in between, which opens up the Gulf to a lot of moisture transport. Now, the models are not in really great agreement about total amount of moisture. By the way, you can get all of these maps on agweather.com if you want to stop and sit on them and look at your individual region. But if we come in here and compare it to the GFS, look at the differences. There's the Euro, there's the GFS. And when you subtract one from the other, the GFS model is right now trying to put down in this stripe right in through here anywhere between 1 inch to up to 4 inches more than the European is. It's already wet, but the GFS is so much more aggressive on the wet conditions. And that's right in a stripe that has been in, like I said, in deep drought for a while. So we just compare the models. This is what you get when you subtract the precipitation totals over the next 7 days. Now, what I also like to do is just look at them side by side. So what I've got here is the GFS on the left, European on the right. Everything came back in fine today with the GFS 0Z run. Sorry for that delay yesterday. But playing this out into the weekend, look at the moisture coming into the west. It's just a daily thing. You're just going to watch it every day. Keep an eye on the radar to see when the moisture gets to you. But this is Sunday getting into Monday. At that point, there's high pressure here, there's high pressure here, and everything opens and squeezes right in this area. Now, what I'm concerned about is the transition as we go look at this from early Monday morning, the risk of some freezing rain showing up in these areas. So we'll be able to talk about this right away at the end of the weekend. and then that spreading to the north, interacting with what will still be snow cover in this area. And we've talked about how that snow cover is going to influence the lower level temperatures. And will we be able to get out of this high pressure cell here and the one that's over here? So just take a look at this. So that flow's coming around. This is mild. This flow's coming around. That's cold. Do we get that sandwiching effect of the warm air running over the top of the surface cold air, giving us this mix of precipitation next week? That's what I'll be keeping an eye on. But the one thing is for sure, there's a lot of wet weather coming on repeat out of the Gulf through next week, which spreads east and then opens up again and again. Look at this. This is next Thursday, getting into next Friday. There's just going to be 4 or 5 days of moisture transport in this corridor. And that's what we're just seeing in the models, while the West sees another 7 or 8 days of just constant flow. Once we get out there to around the 27th, things start to shift around a little bit. And that shifting around is going to just give us a whole new look as we finish one month and begin the next. So I'll get to that in a moment. Here's what I'm looking at in terms of total snowfall. I'm playing the high-res European model, and we're going to take it out 1 full week. Now, in the near term, more snow here, and we're going to keep an eye right in this part of Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, the DC area, right around Philadelphia for the potential for 3, 4, 5 inches of snow. We can see also right in this quarter some heavier snows as well, enhanced by the lakes. Then what we've got is the systems next week that are trying to put down more snow coming out of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, over toward Michigan. The snowfall totals in the west are not that impressive. There's mild air that's coming in with this, and in terms of like just delivering a big atmospheric river type flow of moisture, we're not seeing it. So there's still snow getting added in the west, but these are not big totals. Comparing that to the GFS, we do see some similar things, right? There's that next week. Here's this week going right now. I like it. I think there's a lot of similarities in these two forecasts. On the ice side of it, we're going to continue through this early weekend, adding more into this area that's already been devastated. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I think this might be our country's first $1 billion weather disaster of 2024. But then next week, look at this. This is Monday morning to Tuesday morning. We just need to know that we could be talking about the risk of ice in some of this area with the overrunning that's setting up. Let's move on to some probability maps. I'm going to start off with snowfall. Who's got the best chance in the next 10 days of grabbing 3 inches? So now you can see with the current system going through here and into New England with the lake effect, system number 2, the one that comes out next week, adding its snow possibly into parts of Iowa, northern Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. There you go. And then the west, these are not overly impressive snowfall totals out west. What I do want to flip over to are the probabilities for precipitation. There we go, sorry. And I want to show you the drier side of this first. Let me flip back to that 0Z run. Whoops, I didn't click on the drier side. That's the drier side. And over the next 10 days, what's left out of the flow is this large, let's draw a triangle here. It's just not. It's coming in like this. It's missing it. There's no jet stream flow, which is leaving this area out. So this is the chance over the next 10 days of receiving less than a ½ inch. On the wetter side of this, though, here's the chance of 1 inch. Here's the chance of 2. And here's the chance of 4. Extremely wet conditions down here and in parts of the Pacific Northwest, coastal parts of the Pacific Northwest. After that, it's going to be all about jet retraction. Already by next Thursday into Friday, the jet pulls itself back, but the flow splits. And that's not the way to get it to split if you want to deliver a lot of cold air. So into the end of this month, this is Tuesday, January 30th, the jet's here, but that split is happening right in this area. And that leaves a lot of North America out of the right flow from the right direction to get a lot of precipitation. So they end up getting mild air, but we don't end up getting the moisture. So what you see here, this is coming on the tail end of next week. So I'm talking about the 22nd through the 27th. And then following that, I expect this all to go over drier. Maybe a little bit of moisture in the very corner of Washington to British Columbia, but I think it's going to open up to a drier pattern. So I think about that in the context of where we've been since the beginning of this water year, because a lot of the moisture that's been in the part of the plains came from those snow events. This was back here at the end of December, plus remember, since October, we had late season moisture in fall. But flow has missed out here, and it's only recently come back to this area. this continues to be a big concern for me going through the rest of this winter, and I'll show you why in a few moments. Now, since the start of the new year, we've been very, very wet in this area, wet here and wet up the East Coast. But I'll be heading here over to Sioux Falls tomorrow on Saturday, and I'm thinking a lot about how dry we've been in parts of the upper Midwest here and also the northern plains. This extends into Montana, which has been very dry as of late, despite some of the recent snows that just came through. So I think there's a lot of things kind of jockeying for position here to deliver moisture, but they're not coming back anytime soon to much of the plains and Canadian prairie. But we do know this. The recent moisture that's come through has really improved the Mississippi Basin, the Delta, the lower Mississippi River Valley, parts of the Ohio Valley with moisture, and we know that that snow is going to be melting in this area, helping to improve some of this. But as it stands, the Mississippi River from 1 week ago to this morning is up 17 feet. And so it's now 15 feet above low stage. The drought monitor released yesterday didn't show much change. We have about a third of the country in drought, about 50% of the country from abnormally dry into the drought categories. But you're going, wait a minute, didn't we just dump a bunch of rain down here? Isn't there more coming? I'm like, yeah. But remember, the drought monitor is a cumulative statistic. It takes months and months to change because it's keeping track of months and months of deficits. And as we go forward, the most important thing will be the transition of this map between now and the beginning of April. And I got new information for you about that in just a moment. First, a quick update on the temperatures. Minimum temperatures this morning getting into Saturday, very cold. Temperatures in the morning tomorrow in the minus 20 range with the wind chills. It's going to be a problem. This is Sunday morning, again, brutally cold. But watch this transition. This is now Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, and then Thursday, very, very mild air, which means the low temperatures that are being seen right now, when you compare them to the low temperatures next week, they may increase over 40 degrees, maybe 50 degrees difference in a span of 5 days. That's low temperatures alone. So major shifts in the temperature pattern coming. Now, what I'm waiting on is to see if there's evidence that when the Pacific jet retracts, which it's extended now, but it will retract, are we going to be able to unload the cold air that's building up in Alaska, day 5 through 10, or the Canadian archipelago, or up in Greenland? Because it's quite mild while that Pacific air floods in and there's no source of cold air for much of North America. Day 10 through 15 shows the same thing, and the European model is very much in agreement with this. This is where the confusion comes in. I've made a case that the MJO is the most dominant teleconnection. It's running over the top of El Nino. And the MJO has been coming through these warmer phases for North America. And I told you all week, I think if it just makes it over here, sure, you get that second week of February, bring it on. The cold air's coming. But some of the new long-range data says stall it out. And if the MJO gets stuck right here, that's going to be critical for both North American and South American weather. And we'll talk about the South American at the end. But if it sticks here, I don't have a strong signal to tell you to expect really cold air anytime soon after this weekend's cold air goes through. And the longer range models, because of this, I've gotten stuck in what I call persistence mode. From the 22nd of January to the 22nd of February, they're just leaving what we've got in place. So opening this up to the wetter conditions, weaker flow in the southwest, weaker flow and drier in this area. And that's that time period, that 30-day time period from the GFS extended, here's from the European. They agree. I mean, this is just a copy, really, of the same thing. I don't buy it because I don't think we truly understand what's going to happen when the jet retracts. I don't think the MJO stalls out. If it does, the models win. If it doesn't, I think we got something different coming and coming very soon. Now, speaking of the longer term, we've made this case that El Nino's peaked. It's fading. We looked at it yesterday very carefully. We watched the ocean temperature changes. Question is, how fast does it fade? NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center, are one of the most aggressive forecasting centers globally on getting rid of El Nino by spring and rapidly developing La Nina. Most aggressive. And the speed at which this happens ultimately determines the pace at which spring and summer temperature and precipitation patterns evolve, and I'm worried about the drier side of it for certain places. Now, their newest drought outlook, this goes all the way out now to April 30th, sees improvement south, which we expected, some improvement here in the plains, which might be very important for the winter wheat crop. But, parts of Iowa have a 4-year deficit of over 40 inches. We see the drier conditions possibly lingering in parts of the Mid-South and the Midwest. Big area of concern for me is going to be right here, and then what happens on the high plains. Now, watch this very carefully. The new CPC update, which you just Google climate prediction center, will be taken here. You can go up to the 1 month outlook, and we can see what they're projecting for the next month. They're given just this full bore El Nino outlook. Mild north, cooler south. That's typical El Nino. And I'm just telling you, there's too many things running over the top of El Nino that could influence this and make it off. But if you keep it on, sure, we're wetter here and we're wetter there. I'm not buying into this just yet because we haven't seen it just yet. I've yet to see the atmosphere give a full El Nino view to Southern California, Arizona, parts of Utah, and Nevada. And the dryness you see here that's coming in that they've issued for the rest of February, well, just remember, in the near term, we're going to be hammering this area with a lot of moisture. So a lot of questions about this. What they've also done is release their new 3-month outlook. And this is what they've got for February, March, and April. Now, my biggest concern going into this growing season is the speed at which El Nino collapses and what that's going to mean, for the drought picture in the U.S. So when you come to this website, this is what I want you to do. Come up here and then click on the word 3 or the words 3-month outlook, because it'll take you to their actual forecast pages, their official forecasts. You can see the time periods here, and then you can look at T for temperature or P for precipitation. Let's go to March, April, May. What I'm concerned about is this. We expect tight planting windows in the Midwest, drier conditions building into the Northwest, and very wet down in this part of the Cotton Belt. What I'm concerned about is how quickly this flips over. Now, this could be amazing for winter wheat, March, April, May. But what if we go into, just click right over here, April, May, June. What I don't like in these forecasts is they're starting to extend and build with each new month that's added to the forecast, the risk of drought between these areas here, arrow there. So this would be April, May, June. How about May, June, July? See it? And what we're seeing in the models is this kind of dividing line somewhere along the Mississippi Basin, where wetter is east and drier is west. And then if you just keep stepping forward, that's May, June, July. How about June, July, August? Now we're getting that same flavor. Now, do you trust these models, just as gospel truth? No. This is just one set of parameters to look forward to going into the forecast. And the statistical skill is not high. We don't look at this and know that it's nailed it every single year. But that's why we looked at the European model. We looked at the the NMME, and I'm going to add a new one to it today, which is the IRI multi-model forecast. Now, what this does is this takes the data from the National Multi-Model Ensemble and applies a statistical correction to it. And this is actually what the CPC uses when they make their forecasts. February, March, April shown here. This is now March, April, May. You can see the drier conditions here and the risk of maybe some tighter windows in this area for spring planting. Now, if we continue, this is April, May, June. Watch the drier move out of parts of the Great Basin toward the Western Plains. And then we see May, June, July. That's where I think the risk is going to be. Now, I don't show the temperatures on this because they're biased too warm, and it's difficult to assess when you look at those temperature maps, like things like late frost. We can't tell that yet for spring, so we'll have to sit on it and wait. But this is the newest piece, and on Monday in that video, I think I'll summarize all of these longer range forecasts for you, and we'll have a good discussion about it. From there, though, I do want to talk about South America, because October through December, record dry here across the center-west region, parts of the northeast growing areas, really wet south, Argentina making a recovery. Since the beginning of the new year, we've had a lot of moisture getting into pockets here in the center-west region and in the northern growing areas, and wet conditions in Argentina. But if you want to look at the ranks maps, there have still been places, look at this, that have missed out on this New Year's rain, while much of Argentina has gone over very wet. That is the wild card. If Argentine rain is producing a sizable crop here, we want to know if the increases in the crop size here are going to match the decreases we're expecting as harvest continues to roll across Brazil's center-west growing areas. And as we look out there, the models continue to put wetter conditions at the end of the month in this area where we expect to be doing rapid harvest. And how long that lasts is going to be up to the MJO. And the models are stuck on persistence, which means they're leaving it around through much of February. If this does occur and delays harvest progress, you also delay the planting of the safrinha crop. And you know that I've been concerned about the pace at which El Nino drops off and the eventual size of that safrinha crop. And what I want to show you now is the same forecast I just showed you, but for South America. This is February, March, and April. But March, April, May is critical for the safrinha crop. And most of it's grown in this northern and center-west growing area. Okay? So that corn crop needs to have the rains last through April and into early May. And if we see a drier signal here, this means that if the crop goes in late, which is a possibility because of the delays in soybeans, we could be talking about issues here with the crop not having the right moisture post-pollination to do grain fill well. And that's what I'll be watching most carefully. That's the critical piece. Argentina, though, I don't see a strong signal. This is going to be a great growing season down here for Argentina, I think. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll come back and talk more about this into next week. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you then. Thanks.